Hi, and welcome to the Outquisitions podcast, where we spotlight industry leaders redefining success. The goal of each episode of the podcast is to uncover their stories, their strategies, and insights to inspire, inform, and really elevate your own journey. So let's dive into today's conversation with yet another super inspiring guest. If you want to listen to a really interesting talk, then stay tuned. So, Melissa, great seeing you on the podcast. Thanks for coming in. First question, please present yourself and your company.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Melissa Bloom. I am the founder of Expanse Strategist, and I'm also a Vistage CEO chair. And my company is really intent on helping other companies simplify growth and complexity, especially for people that are really ambitious founders or they're looking to grow their company in ways that are sustainable and maintain a company culture that they will be proud of and leaving that kind of a legacy.
Right. Okay. So what's the vision? And I mean, you've touched a little bit before this podcast about your history in education and so on.
Yes.
Can you walk us a little bit through that as well?
Yeah, sure. So I spent 2 decades in public education here in the United States. Started off as a classroom teacher, worked my way up into district level assistant superintendent positions. When I completed my doctorate, I actually decided to go a different route. And I got my first position in corporate for-profit education. I worked for an international education company and led a research and evaluation center. And through my time at the company, found myself once again climbing the ladder, so to speak, and ended up as president of this international ed tech and professional services company. Now, I was there during COVID and a few other kind of hectic moments in the life of that company. And because of a business model that we brought in, I was able to scale that company 200% during a time which that really should not have been done theoretically, right? Nobody was doing that during COVID or soon thereafter. And because of that model that we used and maintaining a culture, people really wanted to be there. I realized that I was on to something. And I started my own company, Expanse Strategist, a year ago to help other companies do that as well. So I license a model called Predictable Success. I'm a scale architect licensed to use that model. And that's a framework I help other companies put in place in order to see that sort of growth that I was able to experience.
Right. Okay. So who do you specifically help and
Sure.
how? If you can touch a little bit upon this predictable success, right, model.
Yeah.
Would love to know a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah. So Predictable Success is a model developed by Les McEwen. He's from the UK. Actually, I think he is from the UK. And he's been around a really long time figuring out what works and what doesn't work in companies.
Mhm.
And it is just a really sensible way to look at the life cycle of where a company is right now and targeting exactly what's the right thing to do and what are the things that they don't need to do that are just going to continue adding complexity and layers of difficulty to what they're trying to achieve to get to this place that we call predictable success, that place where a company can actually live, be innovative and profitable and have a culture that they want to maintain. And how do you stay there? Some companies go a little bit too far, to the right side where a lot of bureaucracy and red tape exists. Some companies just haven't quite made it through the rough part of startup life or actually trying to scale and put the right processes in place and haven't gotten there yet. So what I do is help people get there to that predictable success. So really, I work with CEOs, founders, executive leadership teams of these growing companies to be able to get to that place, to stave off the gaps that they have, to put the right systems in place, not overcomplicate things, and really, avoid burnout that can happen when you're trying to do that.
Would you say that most entrepreneurs, CEOs that you are working with are usually
kind of neglecting the basics and going over to the complex most of the time, even if there's no, reason to go there?
I think it's a little bit of both. Um, Once a company has found the initial piece of success from that startup life, and they're trying to transition into a sustainable business, the mistake I see is attempting to do what they were doing, but more of it,
Right.
and kind of try to scale that. And that doesn't work because that is a model that works only for early success. And it is not a scalable system. We say yes to everybody. We do all sorts of things. Everything's sort of unique. It's all hands on deck, and you can't actually scale a company doing that. So there's that piece. And then I see once a company has gotten into the stage that we call whitewater, which is that piece after they've started to taste success, that they do start to do what you say. They start to overcomplicate things. They start to try to systematize things too soon before they even know if they work yet. Add a lot of processes. And because they're usually also adding people and departments, all of a sudden you have silos and they don't communicate well. And everybody is, trying to do their best, but it's just not working. And that causes a massive amount of frustration and dark work and friction. And if it starts to impact clients, it's the first time that company's reputation is really on the line. And that is such a vulnerable place to be.
Yeah, and you help them obviously to avoid that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what causes those inefficiencies within those companies? Because I guess many founders are going through the same patterns.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
Where does it come from?
It comes from a few places. It comes from what I said earlier, just assuming that that got you here is going to get you to the next step,
right?
And trying to do that faster and at more scale. And it's inefficient because it usually was very people heavy, very dependent on a person to do that. And oftentimes roles are not well established at this point in a business. We've hired people to do things and they've worn a lot of hats, but they don't have very clearly defined roles or responsibilities. So that creates inefficiencies. The way that we make decisions early on is not the same way we should make decisions when we're in a growing company trying to scale. No longer can the CEO and whoever was assisting him, whatever the title he or she might have had, we don't get to make decisions anymore off on a hallway or on a 5-minute Zoom call and call it a day. We have to be more thoughtful about our decision-making process, but we also can't take a week to make a decision and then never roll it out. So there are just a lot of considerations when you have more people, more responsibilities, more roles about how to tighten up those pieces in a company so that you can move forward and you stop binding yourself with complexities.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in your specific industry and market, what are some of the trends that you are currently noticing, observing, and how would you see your industry, evolve within the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I see a lot of leadership gaps during growth spurts, which sort of goes to what I mentioned earlier about we call it hats versus heads. So having the right positions with the right people in them versus people and creating positions around them. So that is often something that we address really early with companies in this phase. I see a lot of lack of systems and processes that are actually efficient and effective. I see a lot of people, especially the CEOs and the executive team, if there is one, really feeling very overloaded, feeling approaching burnout, having felt like they're working all these hours, doing all of these things, and that they can't get ahead. And it's very frustrating to them because a lot of times they're, doing a lot of business. They might be profitable, but they feel like they just cannot get out of this hole that they have dug. And if they don't keep digging, they're never going to get out.
Yeah.
And so that overwhelm is really difficult. And then, leadership teams struggling to delegate effectively or align their goals with their visions for growth. Great visions, great missions, and then not being able to actually align the business strategy to those things. Those are really the places that I see the most angst when I'm talking to founders and CEOs in these companies. And then in terms of what do I see, this is an age-old problem. This is not new. I think this has been, there are a lot of companies that focus on helping people do this. What I think is unique right now is that there are a lot of startups that have come onto the scene over the last decade, and I continue to see more and more. And those startups that find early success will need to learn how to become sustainable businesses, and they'll have to learn how to transition from that. Those are the ones that are going to be around for another decade. And that is where I think we're going to really see who's going to be able to make it, who's going to be able to make it to sustainability out of those early successful startup phases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've told me that you actually help some startups, but also those who are past that level. How has the work been different? Between those two categories, let's say.
Sure. So I tend to work with if I'm working with a startup, it tends to be a later stage startup. And the truth behind that is because at the early stage, what a startup needs to be focusing on is really their marketing and sales arm. This stuff, processes, systems, this is too early for them. And I don't like to lie to people, right? So I will tell you that is what you need to be focusing on. The difference really is in when to bring in those pieces. So with the startup, late stage startups that I work with that are trying to move into more sustainability, it's more about helping them not make too many decisions outside of keeping their customers happy, having the right second in command to the CEO, really keeping focused on what do we need to do right now versus once a company has tipped into that sort of whitewater phase, a lot of times we're having to look at, okay, what isn't working? How do we scale some of this back and actually really focus on the systems and processes that are going to continue to move you ahead? And how do we start getting all of these silos that you may have started to build in your multiple departments and your multiple leadership teams refocused on your mission and your vision and how that actually strategically ties into your strategic plan? So they're just at very different levels, though they all want to get to the same place.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So operations.
Yeah.
How is it? For, let's say, a 10-year-old right now is listening, and she wants to really understand at what point operations are actually important. As you've said, beginning of the journey, startup phase, just sell, market, get some feedback. Then you are at a point where you can actually include operations to scale and go to the next level.
Yes.
What are some of the symptoms that would indicate that it's time to call up Melissa and include operations in one's company?
Yeah, sure. When you start dropping the ball with customers and you start to have customers that are unhappy, when you're not able to deliver in a time frame that you want to be able to deliver, and when you are feeling like you have made some really great decisions and nothing is actually being actioned or executed effectively, when you feel like you have communicated and stuff isn't happening, when there are not effective processes or systems in place to catch issues that are happening and continue to happen, we need to talk about that. We shouldn't be having the same mistake multiple times without addressing why that's happening and putting some things in place to make sure that they aren't. So those operational efficiencies that really do start to come just because a company is starting to grow.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a success story that you might be able to share?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I work with a lot of different sort of companies, but one in particular is really interesting because they have gone from, I think, the first year they probably cleared about maybe $500,000, and this year they'll clear about 1.5 million. So they really grew very quickly, but that really quick growth came with a lot of uh, challenges. So am still working with their leadership team to clarify their roles, where they overlap, help them have better and clearer communication. And what we've put into place in just about 5 months is very structured communication processes, more defined and appropriate SOPs, and improved collaboration that contributes to their operational efficiency, including what should they be measuring right now, what should they not be measuring right now. And they are killing it with client satisfaction, and they are looking to double their revenue in another year. And that is really exciting to me, to see what just stepping back and being able to work on the business
Mhm.
is able to do for them.
Yeah. Okay. So and anyone listening and wants to know more about you and also
Mhm.
predictable success and so
Yeah,
on, this whole model.
sure.
Um, yeah, who let's say is qualified to take a call with you,
Yeah,
and if they are, how can they actually meet with you
yeah,
and have a call with you?
great. Well, I would love to talk to any CEO or executive team who has found that initial first success, and they're really looking to either take their company into that next step of sustainable growth, or they are already feeling pressures of that complexity and want to get to that pivotal place of being innovative and successful. Those are the companies we want to be able to talk to. And then in terms of how do they reach out to me, they can reach out to me via email at Melissa, or I'm sorry, M Bloom, M and then BLOM at expansestrategist.com, or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so they can do that as well.
Beautiful, sweet.
Yeah,
Thank you for
you're
the time.
welcome. Yeah, of course.